Welcome back to a Celtic state of mind. It's match day, gentlemen. I'm Paul John Dykes, and I'm joined by Sean Conley and Kevin McCluskey. Welcome to everybody tuning in from all over the world. Tell us where you're watching the Acsom Bulletin today, where you're going to be watching the game, how much sherbets you've had already, what time it is in your part of the year, because, of course, Sean is dialing in all the way from Australia, and Kevin from Hungary. Gentlemen, I'll start with you, Kev. How are you feeling about today?
I'm feeling pretty confident about today, Paul. You don't always like feeling confident going into these games because you've got a feeling it's going to bite you in the bum every once in a while. But today I'm pretty confident. We'll go through the teams soon, I'm sure. But we've seen that Celtic team. It's really, really strong. We're hitting form, I think, at the right time. They've dropped points in recent games, which also gives you a wee bit of the confidence boost. And today I'm confident about this one. I don't want to be overly confident. I'm not going to make any wild predictions, but I think this could be a very enjoyable afternoon for us. I certainly hope so.
Oh, I like to hear that confidence, that positivity. Sean, are you sharing Kevin's confidence this morning, afternoon, evening in your case?
It's 6:30 p.m. here. Just before getting to the football, they said they would listen. So just a quick shout out to my students who said they'd be listening. Saskia, Toby, Rupert, Lincoln. Hello if you're listening. I do not share Kev's confidence and never will for one of these games. Kev, just as a quick question for academic purposes, how old are you?
I am 40.
Oh, so you're older than me. So why do you not share the trauma that I have? That means that I never go into these games with any confidence, anything other than fear. I was just checking the odds, not because I was punting and betting, just as a marker of kind of where the public viewing this is. And we are odds on, which is, I believe, I will stand corrected if otherwise. It's the first of the 4 this season that we have been odds on going into it. I remember the first one at Ibrox this year, we were 2-1 almost by the time the game started. Our money just went straight up once the teams were announced. Again, I don't really gamble on these. It was just I like it as a good gauge of where the public opinion is at. So the public is apparently confident in us, and I will never feel confident about these things.
And obviously, when you get back to school, there will be a paper on the predictions, the lineups, and everything else that we're going to be talking about today, Sean, to make sure your students are tuning in.
So they would have to be subscribing as well if they comment.
Yeah, they would have to subscribe. So there you go. You're talking about odds on. Maybe a topic for conversation next week. Odds on Edouard is going to be allowed to leave Crystal Palace. Will Brendan Rodgers be interested? Maybe. Will he be able to afford them? Probably not. So let's have a look at the first part of today's show. And it is indeed, it's the lineups, isn't it? Because that is the big talking point. And as you said, yes, a starting lineup that I think has already been described by Brendan Rodgers as the best version of Celtic. Kevin, I'm going to run through it here. Joe Hart in goals. Alistair Johnston at right back with Greg Taylor at left back. The only left back at the club, unless you play Scales there. Carter Vickers and Scales in the centre of defence with McGregor, O'Reilly, Hatate in the midfield. And up top, which was the biggest talking point, I feel, coming into this game, we've got Jamesy Forrest, Daisen Maeda and Kyogo Furuhashi on the bench. We've got Bain, Palma, Ida, Kuhn, Nawrocki, Iwata, Bernardo, Ralston and Welsh. Decent bench, Kev. What do you make of the big talking points then? It's the wings. Rodgers was asked about it yesterday during the press conference. He had a wee giggle. I'm not sure he asked him the question. I think it was fan media talking about playing Maeda and Forrest, and he laughed and he says, "You're trying to give my team away." And at that point, when I was listening to it, Kev, I thought, with his reaction, maybe he is going to play Forrest and Maeda, and that's exactly what he's done. This is the strongest team we've got at the moment, isn't it? I mean, seriously, in terms of every player in the squad that we've got, I would not replace a single player in that starting 11, Scales included.
Yeah, I think it is the strongest 11 that we've got, and I think that's one of the reasons it gives me the confidence for today that we'll get the result. Because I've been thinking about this before, so it was funny that Sean kind of asked that question of what is it that makes me so confident about today's game. because I've gone through the same traumas that he has of watching us in games where we've expected to win and we haven't, or the years where we were always the underdogs in matches. So you never had real confidence about these games for a long time. But I don't know, there's something about this. I thought it was because I don't live in Scotland anymore. So I'm outside of that goldfish bowl of things. It doesn't get rammed down my throat every day. I'm not getting all that negative propaganda that comes out in the newspapers that you hear. But Sean lives further away from me or than me from Glasgow. So it can't be that. I'm not sure. I think going into this game, it's about that team that we've got out there just now. I think it's really strong. I think it is the strongest team that we've got. And I think we've been hitting form at just the right time. We've got players that have been coming back from injury. We've got guys that are peaking in form going into the final 5-6 games of the season. Things just seem to be coming together. So that's the thing that gives me the confidence going into this game. And yeah, like I say, looking at that team, there's not a single player there that you would take out and replace in starting 11 from someone that's on the bench. It's a very, very strong team. Just talent all over that park. And I think if we can control the midfield, that'll be the big area as always. If we can do that, stamp our authority, our style in the game, I think we stand a really good chance of getting the 3 points that we all want.
You know, coming into these games, Sean, you hear cliche after cliche after cliche, don't you? Form book goes out the window, all this kind of stuff. And I think that what we're saying just now kind of seems obvious. That's our strongest starting 11, because people might be saying from the outside looking in, well, of course it is. You always play your strongest starting 11, don't you? But what we mean by that, Sean, is that we've never had the full complement of the spoils. We've not had every player available to play this starting 11. Someone's going to pop up and say, well, we played against such and such on the 13th of December with that team. This is the strongest team, and it's the first opportunity, I think, that Brendan Rodgers has been able to field it.
Yeah, it's very rare in any kind of circumstance. And I noticed some of the stories popping up of the opposition getting their excuses in early with all the injuries that they've got and stuff like that. And look, that I think it would have made a big difference this season, having that midfield three available throughout. Hitate's been a big miss. The wingers have been the wingers, regardless of injury. And and I think the defence has been fairly settled. But yeah, I think the biggest disruption this season has been the midfield injuries, with McGregor and Hitate both missing significant time. And we have looked better in the last few weeks when all three of those have been available. And last week was notable as probably our best performance of the season, potentially, and when all three have managed to get up to speed and up to match sharpness. And we talked about this, Paul, before in a game when when McGregor was still short of it and people were asking for him to come out of the team. Like, no, you need to get your match sharpness. You need to get there. Yeah. And hopefully he's peaked last week and he's just full on it today.
This is the slightly concerning thing, but not to have a dig at anybody that said it, to be honest with you, because I think that in terms of this type of platform, social media, a thought that enters your mind is quickly forgotten, right? Normally, but in this day and age, a thought that enters your mind ends up online forever, screenshot, and that thought might not have been the best, Kevin. Sean's right, we were talking about Callum McGregor, but we're talking about the fact that, part of his rehabilitation was probably to have a couple of below standard performances to get the sharpness. And I think at the weekend against Hearts, people will remember the double tackle. Absolutely, it was brilliant. Got everybody on their feet. And there was a great energy around about that. But overall, his performance was back to what we would expect from the captain.
Yeah, last weekend he was excellent. We spoke about it at the time, and I think you even mentioned before the game that you were expecting the big performance from him and from Rio, and I think we got it from both of them. And it was that kind of.
Thanks for reminding me that I got something right, Kev.
Hey, no worries, mate. We're quick to put you down when you get things wrong.
Broken clock.
Once in a while, when you get something right, we'll talk you up as well.
Cheers.
But those two last week, they were excellent. They were back in form, and everything they did, it wasn't just that 60-yard run back and double tackle by McGregor that announced himself. It was his whole 90-minute performance. He was on top of it from, I think, pretty much the first whistle to the last. And we needed that. And yeah, I think he needed minutes. So he didn't need poor performances. but he needed minutes in his legs to just ease himself back into the team. So yeah, it was great to see him coming back and just putting in that level of performance. And we'll need that from him again today. And because he's done it last week, like you can now, you've got the confidence. So last week people were saying don't play McGregor because he's past it now. He's had a couple of bad performances. Now he's back. Everybody understands that we need him in the team. I think he will be the heartbeat again, and I think he will be the one that drives us forward. And again, Sean, it's one of the reasons why I've got confidence in us for today. These guys are coming back at the right time, and I just hope they prove me right.
The big thing for me, again, always tuning into Brendan Rodgers' pre- and post-match conferences, because I do feel that he doesn't give everything away, but there's little moments and you think to yourself, wow. I mean, what his comments yesterday about Callum McGregor, Sean, talking about the fact that one of the biggest reasons for him coming back to Celtic was because Callum McGregor was still here. I mean, he talked him up, and I know he's good at doing that. He almost prepared us for the reintroduction of Jamesy Forrest, by telling us that he was the best winger at the club. A couple of weeks later, he starts to bring him back into the team, and actually he's proven at the moment that he is on form the best winger at the club. But what he was saying about yesterday about Captain Callum McGregor was, even for me, it was quite surprising. But actually, in essence, what he's saying to Callum is, this is how important you are. You're the reason I'm at this football club. And again, I'm not saying it's mind games, but psychologically, he's got this habit, Sean, of tapping into his players in this way. He's done it with Jamesy. He's now done it with Callum.
Yeah, and I think he tried to take him to Leicester when McGregor was about 27, 28. And I've actually got a long memory about these things. And it's something I always kind of put a perspective on with any young player, like, for example, Stephen Welsh right now. Is that I still remember when McGregor was 24-ish, and that was a point where he was in and out the team enough that he would sometimes start European games, but there were still a lot of fans that were just like, this guy is not good enough, get him out of the team. And like it was 3-4 years after he'd made his debut, and people were giving him a really hard time. And I think it was just after that. I think after he had that miss in Germany against... who was it? Mönchengladbach. Yeah. And I think just after that, it kind of clicked for him at that point. And he's obviously just been the absolute best player in Scotland, save for a few flash in the pan Jotas and the likes coming in and going. He's been the most consistently top tier player in Scotland since then. He's been dominating. He's basically the Paul McStay of our era of the 20s.
Yeah, and the thing, again, I'm going to go back to regards to a couple of games, a dip in form, that kind of thing. When you're playing that amount of games, the amount of games that Callum McGregor plays, surely it's going to take you a while just to get right back up to that peak match sharpness. And I think, listen, Hearts, again, was a massive part of his rehabilitation. And coming into today's game, I feel confident that he's ready. I mean, we've spoken time and time again about Daisy Maeda, Kevin. I keep saying he divides opinion. I don't even know why he divides opinion, because even his most fervent fans like me, right, can say that he's not very good at this, he's not very good at that. But I've said it before and I'll say it again. A fit Maeda plays in every single team for me. Every starting 11, he's in it. And Brendan Rodgers obviously agrees with that. And again, there's always this focus on their right-hand side, their goal-scoring defender, how to nullify it. We showed how we could do it at Ibrox within 30 seconds. But I think it's a huge boost, isn't it? And we've seen even the fans getting a lift when Maeda came on against Hearts.
Yeah, I think Maeda divides opinion because football fans are just so fickle, and we change our opinions on things like the weather sometimes. He's such an important player for us, but you can understand at times why he can get on the wrong side of some of the fans, because he doesn't have a final ball. His final product isn't always there, and it's really frustrating because he gets himself into such good positions and then his cross goes into the stand and you're sitting pulling your hair out. But that's just something you've got to take with him, because everything else he brings to the team is phenomenal, and he does the work that no one else in that team can do. There's no one else that's got the work rate that he's got that can last the full 90 minutes of just constant running and harassing defenders at the pace and tenacity that he does. And like you said we saw it within 30 seconds of the last game at Ibrox. There wasn't another player in that park that's going to put that level of pressure on Tavernier so early on in the game. And he does it because it's just natural to him. Tavernier doesn't have a clue what to do. He's spooked by the boy coming over his shoulder, and we get a goal from it. And that's the kind of positive unpredictability that he brings. And he's absolutely vital for these games because of that reason. He will pin Tavernier back. It's strange to say that their right back is probably their most dangerous attacking player. So if we've got Maeda doing that, it frees up Hatate, Forrest, Kyogo, O'Reilly to be the creative forces if we need them to be. I think his job is still so underrated and undervalued by a section of the support.
I think you can look at it as a kind of contrast with Kyogo, where what Kyogo can bring, and you've seen it in the first two derbies of the season, is Kyogo can bring a piece of quality, which is an outlier of the match. He'll score, he'll score a low percentage chance. Whereas Maeda is the opposite. What Maeda does is he brings up the team percentage of making chances. So he brings up the overall chances of scoring a goal rather than being the one who's more is likely to do the individual piece of brilliance.
Pulling a rabbit out of the hat, and Kyogo's done that a couple of times this season. We're going to be talking obviously about the encounters coming into this game, all very tight, of course, this season. And there's one final game after today against Rangers, and that'll be the Scottish Cup final. But before we do that, we have Mahesh Raja Clement playing Sterling right wing and not starting Cantwell. I think he is doubling down, trying to stay more narrow and disrupt Celtic's transition. I think game plan is stay close and win in the second half. Well, that leads us on to our opposition today and the team lineups, obviously, of Rangers. And there's been a lot discussed in and around, obviously, both sets of lineups. And we've been hearing all week about the injury troubles that Rangers have had this season. To be honest with you, I've not been focusing on them. I've been focusing on Celtic's injury issues this campaign. Butland starts in goals. Tavernier is at right back with Suter, Davis, Barisic making up the back five. Lundstrom, Diomande, Lawrence, Sterling, Silver and Dessers. And then on the bench, we've got McCrory, Ridvan, Cantwell, Dowell, Wright, Roof, King, Raskin and McCausland. That's the team that we're up against. We've got to obviously, I think Brendan Rodgers always does this, Kev, always shows respect to the opposition. And we're going to be looking at some of the head-to-heads that we might be looking at today, obvious and otherwise. William Brennan, 3-1 to the champions. William is sharing a wee bit of your confidence there, Kev. And Andy Heaney is giving us our front six will be too strong for the defence, should win by a couple of clear goals. Now, we're focused on the wingers. We've had a look at the midfield. What about that man up top, Kevin McCluskey, Kyogo Furuhashi, coming for a bit of criticism? He's been dropped a couple of times this season. I remember O coming in to play a few games. I don't know if Brendan Rodgers fancies O, or if there's an injury that we've not been informed of. And then, of course, Ida started a few games and Kyogo spent some time on the bench. But he's back to form at just the right time. I think a big part of that as well is the return of Hatate, Kev.
Yeah, it was another thing that we spoke about last week, Hatate coming back and just how important that is for the whole team. But for Kyogo individually, I think it's massive for him. Brendan was saying earlier on in the season that he's not asked Kyogo to change his game and he was telling him to do the same things as last season. It felt like he was telling pokies with that one because you could tell that Kyogo's not getting the same service. So he was having to change his game to adapt to different wingers, trying to play different cross balls. He was adapting to not having Hatate behind him because we know that he's the guy that spots those runs that Kyogo makes. He spots them earlier before anyone else. And he's playing those killer passes. So there was obviously a change in Kyogo's game, the way that he was approaching it. Whether Rodgers was telling him or otherwise, he did change, and it affected him big time. Rio coming back into that team, we saw it last weekend in particular. He's picking the passes earlier. He's making the runs. I think now Kyogo has the confidence again to make the runs he was making last season because he knows there's a higher percentage, higher chance he's going to get the pass that he wants. And you put him one-on-one with a keeper, put him through and goal, you're supremely confident that he's going to put the ball in the back of the net because he is the best striker that we've had since Henrik Larsson, in my opinion. He's not a Larsson-level striker, but he's the best that we've had. And you always feel that there's a goal in the team when he's there. think as well, during the season, he's probably deserved to be taking out the team from time to time, though, because things haven't worked for him. And he's probably needed that. It's probably been a bit of the kick up the backside that he has needed, because although we had Giakoumakis before, I don't think Ange ever really rated him as the number one starting striker. It was always Kyogo. Now he's got a challenge for that position. And when he's come back in the team, I think you see a bit more hunger from him, a bit more desire. And like I say, you put him in front of goal, goals will happen. And he's done it. He's hit 3 in 3 games against Rangers this season. You wouldn't bet against him putting another one in today.
I think back to that campaign, actually. We're talking about Kyogo, not Ange, for anybody who's wondering. But I do remember during that period when Ange seemed determined, Sean, not to drop Kyogo, and you had Giakoumakis on the bench. There was a period before Giakoumakis left where I don't think Kyogo was at the absolute peak of his powers. And you were saying, why isn't Giakoumakis getting a chance? And I remember Ange being asked that question in a press conference about Kyogo's lack of form, and he says he's been on form since I brought him to this football club. But he shut it down. He shut that narrative down straight off the bat. But I think that this season, it's interesting that Kev says that it's a fit up the backside that he needs. It's probably the first time that he's had that kind of challenge whereby he's been dropped. And he has been dropped unceremoniously a couple of times this season. And I think Ida has done really, really well. But, on this form, that's maybe played into it. The fact that, right, I'm not guaranteed my starting berth. Also, I think the return of some of these guys, Hatate returned to the team, O'Reilly a return to form. I mean, that pass against Hearts was unbelievable that O'Reilly played in for Kyogo. And there was a frustration at some points this season, Sean. You could see it. He was throwing his arms up. He was making runs and the ball wasn't coming. So I get what Kev says about Brendan. And maybe not specifically saying to the wingers, we're going to play differently. But the wingers that we brought in seemed to be playing differently. Yang, Palmer. And he wasn't getting the same kind of service that he seems to have been getting in the last few weeks.
Yeah, it's been an absolute roller coaster of a season in that sense. Like, there was a time where Palma looked undroppable, and now he looks like he's unplayable. Not in the favourable use of that term. And yeah, Kyogo, man, I actually remember. I think I'd written him off basically around about when he came to Sydney. So that had been November 2020, just for the Qatar 2022, just for the Qatar World Cup. And he'd missed an absolute sitter against Aberdeen in the run into the World Cup break. He came to Sydney and he was having a stinker there, and I'd basically written him off. And then I think in January he scores the last minute equaliser at Ibrox, and then he goes on and scores, was it 7 goals against, I can't remember the number, 7 goals in a calendar year.
Yeah.
And that pretty much sums it up for me, because it wasn't that I thought he was a bad player at that point. I was like, this guy's just not going to get us up a level that he's not going to go up the level that we need him to. And then 2 weeks later he did, and I was absolutely eating humble pie. And he's dipped this year, but I do think he's missed Hatate massively. I think, as you mentioned, O'Reilly, like, look at the goals we scored in the Champions League, apart from obviously our Swedish centre-back popping up with one. Like, the goals were O'Reilly and Kyogo linking up. Do you know what I mean? That was the quality in the team. That's you can see it. That's where it shines.
It was brilliant. Yeah, absolute flawless. It was almost like, I remember, people talking about, links between players. In my time, Simon Donnelly and Jackie, I'm not saying it was telepathic, but there was an understanding. And people used to say that McGrain and Dalglish had something similar. But yeah, you're right. The way that flowed, you're thinking to yourself, he's missed that. He's missed that massively. We're going to be having a look at the gaffers coming into this game as well, and how they've approached it. Ian Roy Snitch, talking of another commenter in the chat. Brilliant chat today, by the way, 1,200 strong. And we're probably 6 minutes off the time we would normally go live. So getting in nice and early. Let us know where you're watching, what time it is, and what's your beverage of choice. I'm on a tea at the moment, and it's Earl Grey.
Kombucha.
Oh, yes. Kev, what you got? Water.
A glass of water for me.
Old Hungarian water. There we go. Ian Roy. Saturday at last, 6:45 here and already 80 degrees in Florida. It's beautiful outside here in Dunfermline. Think the temperature will be rising in 45 minutes. Yes, I think you're right. And thank you for supporting the channel every single bit of support is appreciated. Richard Coleman can only thank starting with Forrest for the experience of the Rangers games. Richard, yeah, absolutely. We spoke about, having a smaller group of players that it's not even, is it a trust? I don't mean a trust insofar as there's people letting them down left and right and centre. It's the type of player. It's the type of player who's been through this type of game and a league challenge and winning things. And you look at that team there that we've put out, there is not a new signing in that start 11. There's not a new signing having come to the club this season. Liam Scales obviously has been a great success this season. A lot of people wouldn't have expected him to keep that going, flash in the pan, purple patch. We heard all of that, and here he is. And I think he was brilliant at Ibrox as well. But yeah, I do believe, Richard, that Forrest is in there because, Brendan Rodgers knows that Forrest knows how to ensure that this game doesn't pass him by. He can positively contribute. He can support Alistair Johnston defensively as well. And also his form. His form's put him in there. Donny, tiny hands. Even if they score, we need to keep supporting the team. Cheer every successful pass and tackle. Listen, I suggested yesterday, not in a negative sense, 2-1 to Celtic, and I did feel that Rangers might score first. A couple of reasons behind that. Coming out the traps with all that anger and frustration that we're about to speak about, that seems to have flowed from Clermont, the very top. But also, I'm never confident going into these games when it comes to the officials, unfortunately, and we do have to talk about them from time to time. So, yeah, that's my thinking behind that. But what I did say, the caveat was, don't panic. Kevin McCluskey and I have been here so often at half-time when it hasn't looked the best. Let's look at Clermont and Rodgers and how they're dealing with the build-up to today's game. Brendan Rodgers asked about his record. Fantastic record over both tenures. He seems to be able, Kevin, even when the chips are down a wee bit, as they have been this season, to get enough out of the team to get the result. Now, I know that the media want to create a war going into this game. It's like the sad and tragic individuals who try to create pod wars just to try and get some views on their flailing and failing channels, and they try to hold on to the onto the channels that are just concentrating on doing what they do. And I feel that Brendan's the type of guy who just deals with focusing on Celtic. They've picked up one comment he made last week, Kevin. They've turned it into a couple of thousand headlines. They've thrown the grenade at Clermont, and he's ran with it. You know what I mean? And even the snippet of the kind of pre-interview, the comments that you heard Clermont, he's an angry man. And I don't think that's the best way to go into a game like this. But I also don't think it was intentional by Brendan. What's your thoughts, Kev?
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember the full comment from Brendan, how he came about with it, but I know that the comment that we're talking about here is him saying, and next Saturday we'll have some fun. So I can't remember what the full context and preamble to that was, but it wasn't meant in any way as a derogatory comment. I don't
what
think
he said before that, Kev,
anything.
was what he said before it, just so you understand the full context, was we're going to get the rebs on and we're going to have some fun. So do you think he was taking it in context?
He said we're going to work hard all week so we can have fun on Saturday.
Exactly.
There we go. We'll get the battle fever on. Is that what he was saying?
Oh, dearie me.
So, yeah, I don't think that's an insightful comment. I don't think it's disrespectful. But yeah, it's totally been blown out of proportion. And I think newspapers are using it as a form of clickbait now, isn't it? It's a headline that they can put out on the websites, and it will get people clicking in and trying to read the story and seeing what's there. It's a nothing comment, like getting the full context in from Sean. It is basically him just saying, we're going to prepare for this game, and when we go out there, we'll have no fear. We'll approach it in a way that we think we can win the match, and we'll play the game thinking we can win the match. So it's a completely nothing comment. But when it gets told over on the other side of the city, and we spoke about this, I'm sure, before the last Glasgow derby, that Clermont seems to be a manager who allows his emotions to control him a little bit more than he should. And it's really got under his skin. So he's taking the comment completely out of context. He's taking it away that's riled him. And I think we've got to use that as as much as they'll try and use it to benefit them, but we've got to take that as well and just go, look, without doing anything, we've got them rattled. Now let's just go out and actually play that game that we know we can play. And as I've said before, Celtic Rangers, if it becomes a football match, Celtic will win. And that's what we've got to make today.
Yeah, I get that. By the way, I don't listen to, and I'm not just playing up to this. Is it Clyde? Is it Clyde one that the Hugh Keevins shows on? Seriously, I don't listen to it, right? But I jumped in the motor yesterday, and as is always the case, the missus listens to, is it George Bowie, GBX, all that kind of nonsense. Aye, the same guy. So I was going somewhere last night, and I caught a snippet. I got a snippet of the show Shuggy Keevins is on just as I left the vehicle, and he spoke about the situation, and I thought he got it spot on. Credit where credit's due, Sean. He says that Clermont is getting dragged into these situations, and this is his words, right? He's getting dragged into these situations more than a Ouija would. Now, that was Shug's words, not mine. Yeah. And it does feel as though he's taking the bait, and going into a big game like this, it is all about composure. It's all about making sure you're prepared. There needs to be a calmness in that dressing room. Imagine going into a game like this and your gaffer's losing the plot. Psychologically, how does it affect the team, Sean?
Which one, Rodgers or Clermont? I'll speak to both.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me speak to Rodgers first. So the thing he's talking about having fun, that's not a surprise, because that goes back to his first spell, where big games he would always, what was he said? Fire in the belly, ice in the head. So it's about that. He's trying to calm the players down, because the sense of occasion will get to him. So he's going to be very public with that. But I do think there's a second thread to that, and that's he's actually been quite careless with some of his public comments this year. All the stuff he said around Champions League time about the lack of quality in the squad, that really impacted. Even when we lost the 2 games to Hearts and Kilmarnock, you can draw a straight line to that. And the good girl comment with the female commentator, he has been quite careless on a couple of occasions this year, and I think there's an aspect to that as well. For Clermont, I think he is. He's buying into it. He's gone deep into it, and he does look rattled. He looks haunted. And look, a lot of these things are applied retroactively. We can sit here and say that, and then he can come away, if it's not likely, but say he comes away with a 2-0 win today, and then it's easy to then look back and go, actually, he played that quite well. He picked up on that and he used it to motivate his players. And I think sometimes retroactively that's amplified more than it should be, and I think it's small margins, those things really, and it's really just going to come down to the quality on the day and who performs better. And if somebody does win a tackle that they wouldn't have otherwise because of what Rodgers said, I don't think that's going to have a large percentage impact on the outcome of the game. The person who will be having the most fun today, I think, will be the DJ at Celtic Park, who's probably going to be trying as many songs as he can, referencing fun that he can play at the end of the game. I'm really looking forward to that one, and I'm wondering if the bookies took bets on which song. Probably Girls Just Want to Have Fun. I'm not sure. I reckon if we win, it could be something. There could be a callback there.
I've consistently said it needs to be John Lennon with Mind Games. Who's the Snitch? Might or might not agree. Dave Riley's watching in Sunderland comment at Celtic. Let's party. Superb. Got a pal from Sunderland coming up for the game. I think it's maybe his first Glasgow derby. I don't know why that irks and rattles the Rangers support so much, the fact that you use the correct terminology for this derby game. Urban Culture says, take a drink. I don't know what he means by that, but Kieran wants it on a T-shirt. So there you go. The Hungarian drinking water, Kev, maybe he's talking about take a drink. Instead, he just one out the tap. What time of the day is it over there? That's maybe going to explain your choice of beverage.
Where I am, it's 1:05. I'm just an hour ahead.
1:05 in the afternoon. Is it too early if you're not at the game? I don't know. Depends what you're doing tonight, I guess. Drinking water in hot, sunny Holland. Brendan Monaghan, always an absolute pleasure to see you. Check Brendan out on the socials for his music as well. Absolutely. And we've got Martin Clark come on Celtic. Let's bury them. Hail, hail from Dublin. Yeah, all the Irish contingent coming over, setting off early. I love seeing it on the socials, the people who are probably still half asleep, getting buses to get to the ferry and all the rest. It's superb. Love all of that kind of stuff. But in terms of this psychological battle, a lot of it, Kev, is made up really from the media clutching at straws, trying to create this. But in terms of that, can it work in your favour to be the angry man in the room in a game like this? Can it work in your favour? Can it give you a boost?
I'm not sure. I going into this type of game, I don't think it works to be the angry man. But I think you can certainly, if you're smart enough, you can use psychology in your favour going into these games. I'll take an example of when we went to Blackburn all those years ago in the Seville season.
Mm-hmm.
And from the Celtic Park game, we had the men against boys comment from Graham Souness, and we used that, we turned that in our favour. I don't think we went down there as angry men, but I think we took a comment and we, the old one, you staple it against the dressing room door and you see it every day when you're going into training, and the last thing you see before you go out in the pitch, and you use that to channel some aggression, some desire to go and prove him wrong. I don't think it's about being angry. I think if you're angry going into this game, you will be out of control. Like you'll not be able to focus. The red mist comes down so easy, and you need to have a clear head going into it. Which is why, again, I think Rodgers, when we spoke about this, we can say it before the last one because it was so close. It was only a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think he handled the press conferences leading up to that game so well. He was calm and measured with his responses. I think he had the team very much prepared with that kind of ice in the head kind of mentality that Sean was mentioning there, that they were just going to go out and do the job. They knew what they had to do. Whereas Clement, as I said, I think he's very emotional. I think he lets those things rule his head a little bit more. And you can sense that if there's a big decision to make in a game, he doesn't have the clear mind to make the right call. He'll be ruled by an emotion. If it is anger, it could easily turn against him. So no, I don't think anger is a good emotion to have going into this game, but there's some sort of controlled aggression that he can have. But anger, I don't think that will work for them.
The one thing I will say in his favour is that when they did have the edge on us in the title race, he wasn't over egging it. He wasn't giving it the big yaldi like Steven Gerrard did, back in the day. So he did maintain, there's a lot of good managers have this, never get too high, never to get too low thing. Don't get too low after defeat, don't get too high after a win. And he was maintaining that kind of calm when they had the edge. So I will say that in his favour.
Yep. Hey, listen, I like the balance. We've got Jimmy McGregor. I'm expecting KILMARNOCK to be massive influence on the game. Me too, Jimmy. And Maida. Delighted Maida's back. And let's not forget, Maida might only play 60 minutes. And if he does, and you've got Forrest on the right-hand side, with regards to his age, 32, he's played a lot of football, he's had a lot of injuries. There might be a double switch there. So you're looking at the likes of Kuhn and maybe, thinking back to the form that Palmer showed earlier in the season. For me, they're the two guys I'd be looking at if we need to make changes near the end of the game. And we've got Andrew Fleming at home in Odessa, Ukraine. Hail, hail. Hope for the correct score of 2-0 for the boys. Andrew, I hope you are spot on with that. There's loads more to discuss, and we're going to try and get through as much of it as we possibly can before the end of this 1 hour special leading up to kick-off. And I think one of the biggest talking points for every one of these games are the big personal battles, where it's lost and where it's won in the Glasgow derby. It seems every single one of these games, one of the talking points is Tavernier versus Maida, Kev. And I was thinking about it and talking about it over the last few days. And I just think that the best way to deal with it, get them on the back foot. We've done it within 30 seconds of the last game. That is the best way to deal with that threat. And it is a threat, let's be honest.
Yeah. We've said Tavernier, it's one of those ones. It's an anomaly in football that your right back would be such a creative and attacking player.
Such a talking point. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And he is for them. So as much as you never like to admit these things, you've got to give him a bit of respect for that. You've got to acknowledge that he is a good player. He's a decent player. He's good going forward, and he will be a threat for us. So to nullify that, yeah, you've got Maeda there, who's such a hard worker, a selfless team player, and his job is to pin him back. Now, these two have played against each other, I don't know how many times now, maybe 10, 12 times potentially. I don't think Tavernier's ever learned that he needs to stay back. I don't want him to, but if he's a sensible player, he will rein himself in a little bit and be a bit more defensive in this game, because every time he steps forward, Maeda's on top of him. He gets into the space behind, and that's where we can really punish them and punish him for stepping out and for being defensively and tactically naive that way. So I think it's a really, really big battle. It's an area where we could win the game potentially, because there is a space there that we can exploit. We saw it within 30 seconds at Ibrox, how effective Maeda can be at doing that. That Tavernier gets spooked with players coming over his shoulder because he's not always switched on and aware. And then even if you go back to last season, some of the games, right, a lot of our goals, a lot of our good play was coming through work that Maeda had done beforehand. So he's maybe not always got the assist, but again, the point that Sean made, when Maeda's in the team, the chances of us scoring a goal collectively goes up because of the work that he does. So I think it's a really crucial battle for us. And I think, and I hope Maeda can come out on top once again.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is a battle. I know the kind of threat that Tavernier poses from set plays, there's not much Maeda can do about that. But in terms of nullifying his threat and allowing him up the park, it really is just a case of attacking him, getting him on a back foot. We said it before the game at Ibrox, Sean, and it's exactly what we did. And we spooked them. We went all guns blazing. And at half time in that game, strangely enough, Kev, you're sitting there thinking, right, we could win 3-4-0 here. Didn't happen. And again, during the week, I'm talking about the fact that that's because they had enough quality, they had enough character within their own team, something that you cannot write off. You can't, underestimate that. But that's the most obvious head-to-head. Where else on the park do you see an interesting battle between the players? Is it Lundstrom versus McGregor? I know they're both kind of defensive in their duties, but they could come head-to-head. I was looking forward to McGregor against Cantwell after the last one, where Cantwell was giving a few verbals. Maybe that will happen later in the game.
Yeah, that'd be good actually. Yeah, one that I'm going to be looking for is Kyogo versus Davis. I couldn't tell you exactly which game, but there's more than one occasion. I've got memories of Davis just blocking or holding Kyogo when the ball is in another area of the pitch and the referee's not watching it. So that's something I think he'll probably try and do again, and I'm hoping he doesn't get away with it. So I'll be watching for that one. And they've not really got any wingers playing. They've got is it Lawrence and Fabio Silva. So I'd expect Fabio Silva will be on the left. So that means he's going up against Alistair Johnson. And obviously those two had an incident in the last 3-3 game. So it'll be interesting to see if Fabio Silva is going for that one again. He's not going to get the fans shouting for it in his favour this time. So yeah, we'll see how that one goes as well, I guess.
Yeah, it is a worry we've not covered the officials. It's always a worry. It's always a worry every game we go into. But I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on the Kyogo battle, because the other centre half in there, I know he's done well for them, but I always feel that Suter looks a wee bit heavy. Kev, he looks a wee bit slow, dare I say, and Kyogo is the absolute opposite of that. Give him the service, Kyogo will be your man today. That really would be my message looking at that defence.
Yeah, definitely. So when you were asking Sean there what battles he was looking forward to, that was one I was thinking as well. Kind of match up players or even just areas of the park. Kyogo against Davis, I think, could be a really interesting one. I can't remember which game it is either, but there was a game Davis has pulled him back about 3 or 4 times. He's got arms round him. There's an elbow goes in during the game as well. I think he'll struggle against Kyogo. He has done in the past, and he will do again. And we probably dodged a bullet by not signing him a couple of seasons ago when he was.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you brought that up. Yep.
Yeah, because I remember at the time where he's Preston North End's top defender. They were going pretty well in the Championship, and you're thinking this could be this could be like that left-sided centre back that we need, really classy player, but clearly not. I mean, we're only going on probably newspaper reviews, which is a lot of propaganda at times. And you see him up here, and he's just he cannot cope, I don't think, with the game in Scotland, and he cannot cope against such a clever player as Kyogo. I think his movement is sublime, and he'll pull him all over the place. And for Suter, yeah, he's a guy. He looks like he's always a kilo or two overweight. I don't want to jinx the guy too much, but he's like their Jack Hendry. He was with us. You just feel that there's a mistake in his game at times, like you always did with Hendry. So yeah, I think Kyogo up against both of them will be really interesting. Kyogo will find the space. He's done it countless times. You only need to look again to the last game at Parkhead with that wonder goal that he scores. It's about him being alert, picking that wee bit of space in between the centre backs, and the finish was unreal, and it's what we've come to expect from him. So yeah, I'm quite excited again by that little matchup.
What you're saying is, so I think what you're saying is Ben Davies' agent is better than Ben Davies himself.
There's a few players like that.
Yes,
Nathan Richards' agent is the best agent in the world. You see,
apparently so.
Some of the moves he's got. But you're right to point out the fact that we were apparently pursuing Ben Davies. I'm going to ask Barry a question. Would you take Ben Davies over Liam Scales?
No.
Kev? No. Right.
No.
£4 million player from Liverpool. And we're sitting here saying, no, Liam Scales is a better player. And I think that's sometimes what we need to look at. You know, Scalesy gets a hard time. I've been guilty of it myself. He gets a hard time. I do believe that in the summer we go in and it's a priority position for me. We've tried with Nat Phillips, Gustav Lagerbielke. We've tried with Mike Nabrowski. We've not been able to find the perfect player for that position to marry that partnership within the central defensive area with Cameron Carter-Vickers. And the best defensive partnership I've got is Carter-Vickers and Scales, and that's why we keep playing him. Scales has played better and is deserving of his games more than the aforementioned three, right? But in the summer, we can still go and buy better. So I think you can have it both ways. You know, Scales, he plays every minute when he's fit for a reason. But coming into the summer months, I think we do go in and we do try to look for another centre-half. And I think this season, a lot of people have been focusing on the fact that we go into this game, going back to the odds that you were talking about, Sean, maybe as slight favourites, but that's not always been the case. Going into the Glasgow Derby matches this season, let's have a wee look back on some of the other games. We've spoke about Scalesy. One of the coming-of-age games was the first match at Ibrox, Sean, where Liam Scales comes in. Even though we had gone out and signed Nat Phillips by that stage, he wasn't fit to play. And we cobbled together a defence. And the central defensive partnership that day was Lagerbielke and Scales. We win the game. 1-0, Scales, he gets the man of the match. A lot has been made of him this season, Sean. Over the piece, going into this game, I'm thinking he's probably in my top 3 Celtic players this season. What's your thoughts?
He's certainly performed above expectations. I think he's the clear winner for the Anthony Ralston of the Year Awards.
Yes.
Is that what they call it? Look, he won man of the match in Champions League. All things you can't argue with. And obviously, you mentioned before, we should be looking to upgrade. We should be looking to upgrade on Kyogo and Hatate and Carter-Vickers. We should be looking to upgrade everywhere, right? It's not really a disparagement to say that we want to be one of the best and we want to have better players in every position. And you're right, Scales is currently the best man for the job. There's no one else you'd rather have in there right now within the current squad. He did win man of the match in a stadium without any Celtic fans. When we were heavy underdogs, he had a great game, and it wasn't that game. We were somewhat backs to the wall at points in that game. I know we played really well in the first hour, but then after that we were under some real pressure, and he won a lot of headers. He made a lot of clearances. He was really composed, and when you're getting that many balls coming your way, the chances just increase that you're going to make a mistake just based on the percentages, and he just stayed composed. He was very impressive in that game. So yeah, I've been impressed with him. I was just looking. Do you want me to talk about other games, or do I bounce?
Yeah, batter on. Yes, all 3 games.
Just one thing I noticed as well. I was looking through them earlier. Was man of the match in the second game was Paul Bernardo, which was interesting.
Yeah.
But I was also looking at the opponents, and on the BBC reports for the 3 games this season, the top rated player for Sevco in all 3 games was Jack Butland.
Okay.
So I don't know what that's probably speaks to it a lot in all 3 games. So yeah, I think actually in the first 2 games, they were actually relatively close games, and we won with goals that were low percentage goals. And I actually think the game we played the best out of the 3 games was the 3-3 game, if I'm being totally honest. And it was the only one we didn't win. And that's interesting in and of itself, I think.
I would agree with that. I would. And you're talking about the moment, those moments that Kyogo can pull a rabbit out of the hat, for example, the goal that Bernardo scored, and the fact that you've reminded me he was a man of the match just shows you how this season has gone. I've quite liked Bernardo, and I know that he's had patches where he's looked better, Kev, but you can't forget his contribution. I keep saying this about Palmer. You can't forget that they have contributed. I'm going to stick my hat on the fact that I think there's going to be a couple of these guys that we do get players out of. Now, I know we're starting today's game with no new signings in the starting 11, right? None of the 9 guys that came in the summer, none of the 2 guys that came in the winter, if you like. None of them start today. But I don't think it's a case of us writing off every single one of them. And I was talking about this yesterday. I think yesterday what I was talking about is the fact that we might get a player out of Palmer. We might still get a player out of Nawrocki. Is it fitness and sharpness? We can't afford for him to have the 3 or 4 games that Callum maybe needed to get up to top kind of smart sharpness. We can't afford to do that at this stage of the game. Whether or not we buy either or Bernardo is a completely different argument. But I don't think we can freely write off every single one of them, Kev. It's really just I'll go back to that time. Remember when Neil Lennon got the job on a temporary basis after Mowbray was sacked? And we still had the Scottish Cup to play for. And he went, and other than the Scottish Cup game against Ross County, Neil Lennon won every league game from taking over the team to the end. And it was a case of there were players who we've spoken to, Acsom spoken to, who were told by Lenny, listen, you're in my plans, but no for this next 8 games, I think it was, right? I just need to win these games. And it was just like knuckling down, batten down the hatches. These are the guys that are going to win me the games. You guys will come back to you in the summer. Do you think there's a sense of that, Kevin? Do you think you'll be able to salvage some of the transfers, particularly from the summer window?
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at the back line to start there, so you're not going to change your centre-back pairing unless you absolutely have to. It seems like it's one of those areas of the park where you need to build a partnership. Scalens has been in pretty much every week this season, and he's been there on merit because he's been a top defender, and then it's been who plays alongside him. Well, if Carter Vickers is fit, it's him. So that's been the defensive pairing. I think there's a player in Nawrocki. I think the fleeting games we've seen of him, he looks pretty decent. But at the back, you just cannot afford to give somebody 3 or 4 games to get up to speed and see what they can do. I think, we won't write Nawrocki off, but we can write this season off for him. And we can say, you just go again, you work hard in training, you get pre-season behind you, and he'll start to play games then. And if he impresses in pre-season, he gets the nod for next year. I think there's a player there, and we can look forward to that for next season. Palmer's another one. Like, as you say, his contribution in the first half of the season was pretty spectacular. His goals or goal contributions per 90 minutes was very high. He was given goals, he was scoring, he was creating. But there was always a fear there that there was something just not quite right about him, that he needed to up his game still, or he wasn't consistent enough. So we've seen it in flashes. I think we take him out of the team now because we need consistency. Mm-hmm. But again, that's why we train every day, so that Brendan can get them on the training park and work on the deficiencies in the game, and maybe he comes back stronger next season. I've still got big hope for Odin Holm. I think there's a real player in there.
He's just disappeared, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a loan spell.
Don't you think we should have done it in January, guys? Right. Because he's not played since January. Get him out on loan.
There's a few players we should have got rid of on loan in January, and he's one of them. Maybe O is another one because he's been completely out of the picture. Mm-hmm. Lagerbielke, who almost had pen to paper on a move away, definitely should have been another one. But like I say, for me, I think there's a player there, but what we need to do is improve our development plan for players like him, because not playing will not improve him. And playing in the Lowland League, if he was ever to go down there, won't improve him as a player. But I think there's someone or something in there. Bernardo, the one that we were talking about earlier on as well, again, there's clearly a player there. He was, in my opinion, I think the man of the match in the game against Atletico Madrid. The effort that he put into that game was stunning. The goal that he scored against Rangers at Parkhead was, the technique in that is unbelievable. It's a great hit. He's clearly got something about him. Again, is there a consistency thing? Is it because he's young, because he's only 20, 21 years old? You know, he might still need time to develop and grow into the player that he can become. But yeah, there's certainly maybe 3 or 4 of those players that you definitely wouldn't write off. We just need to find a proper development plan for them. And you're not doing that in the final 6 games of a league season. At this point, you've got hopefully a consistent 11 that you know is going to go out there and do you the job every week. And you've got 11 starters that you can trust. Unfortunately, that same level of trust isn't there for the likes of Palmer and Bernardo at the moment. And that's why they're not in the starting 11.
No, I'd agree. I would agree with that. And I think that I would be keeping Nawrocki, who's, of course, on the bench today, as are Palmer and Bernardo. I'd be keeping Nawrocki and letting Lagerbielke and Kobayashi, remember him? I'd let those guys go. Run with what we've got and bring in another first pick, because what we haven't purchased, and this is clear from the start 11, is someone who is going to be a first pick. He's going to be a first team starter. We've not been purchasing enough of that type of player. Hail, says David Wilson from Clyde, Australia. Yes, we are merely minutes away from kick-off at Celtic Park. I've called it the biggest Glasgow derby of all time. It's definitely the biggest derby for me in the last 12 years. We've also got Danny Boy, right to I'd love to be in McCafferty's Donegal Diamond. What a bar. I miss it. Danny, where are you? Where are you watching this game, and what is your beverage of choice? David Canavan, come on Celtic, from all your fans all around the world. It really brings home on days like today when you start seeing the comments coming in from all over the globe, just how massive a reach Celtic has, and this fixture as well has got a huge reach. And I am going to be asking my compadres today for a prediction. I'm going to start with you, Sean. We've done all the talking.
I was hoping you wouldn't.
3 minutes away, two or 3 minutes away from kickoff. How's it going to go?
I'm going to go with tactical pessimism so that I can be delighted if I'm wrong, and I'm going to say 1-1.
Hey, listen, see if it's 1 each after this game. No problem with that. It's no ruining my weekend. Kev, what about yourself?
I'm a little bit more optimistic, and I will go with I'm going to go with either a 2 or a 3-1 win for the good guys.
The good guys, indeed. Thank you, every single one of you, for coming in. I'm going to allow you.
What about you, Paul?
I've predicted 2-1. I've predicted 2-1.
You're not getting away with this.
Hey, 2-1. 2-1. And what I would say, that the real important part of my prediction is, if we do go behind, don't panic. I think all the hard work, like Brendan has said, all the hard work's been done. Stick to your game plan. You'll come through it. The right team. I don't see anybody in the comment section saying we've picked the wrong team. We can't then start having a dig at Scales or Forest, who have in the past been given criticism. We can't start doing that if we don't do it before the game. We're sitting here saying it's the correct start 11. It's our best start 11. If we're sitting here at halftime, a goal down, there will be no panic. Not that I want that to happen, incidentally. But that's my prediction. Because it's a big game, because there's something like 90 seconds to kick off, go away and watch it. 1,200 strong on the pre-match. Thank you, every single one of you, for coming along and joining the chat. And thank you to Sean Conley and to Kevin McCluskey for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.